Hello detectives, welcome back to Criminal Minds True Stories, where today we delve into a case as chilling as it is heartbreaking. In this story, we explore the Adrianna Hutto case, when a son turns witness against his own mother. Prepare yourself, find a quiet place and put on your headphones. Step into the shadows with me as we unravel this dark and unsettling mystery. I'll never forget that day. You know, people say that in a small town, tragedies hit harder, maybe because everyone's lives are so deeply intertwined. Well, Esto, Florida wasn't any different. It was August 8, 2007, just an unbearably hot, sticky day that made you wish you could jump into the water and cool off. I remember Amanda, a single mum in her 20s, who'd just wrapped up her shift as a nursing assistant. She was exhausted, which wasn't surprising. Taking care of patients, then coming home to two young kids, would wear anyone down. Adrianna, her daughter, and little AJ, her son, were all she had. That afternoon, Amanda had planned to take them out for school supplies. Typical, normal plans that any parent would make. But kids, especially when the heat's that relentless, always seem to gravitate toward water. Amanda had this above-ground pool in the backyard. Nothing fancy, just a quick escape from the sweltering Florida heat. Adrianna had asked to go in, and like any mother juggling 1,000 things, Amanda had told her no. There was no time for that. They'd be out the door soon. But anyone with kids knows how persistent they can be, right? Amanda left them in the yard for a few minutes while she gathered herself for their shopping trip, probably just taking a second to catch her breath. What happened next? Well, it's the kind of thing that rewrites your life forever. A few minutes passed, maybe just long enough for Amanda to grab her purse and keys. Then AJ came running up to her, breathless and a bit frantic, telling her that Adrianna was in the pool. Now, Amanda's first thought was probably that Adrianna was just near the pool, maybe reaching over it or splashing around a bit too close. After all, Adrianna was terrified of water, and it seemed unlikely she'd actually be in there. But something in AJ's tone must have caught her off guard, because Amanda rushed out, heart pounding, praying it was just a child's exaggeration. When she got outside, though, the scene was a nightmare. Adrianna was face down in the water, her little body still, her hair spreading out in a dark cloud around her head. In that instant, Amanda leapt into action, pulling her daughter's lifeless form out of the pool. The details are hard to imagine. Adrianna's skin already cold, the faint bluish tinge creeping across her face. Amanda tried CPR, hands trembling, her voice cracking as she screamed for help, dialing 911 in absolute panic. The paramedics arrived, and for a moment, the whole world just stopped as they worked on Adrianna, every second feeling like an eternity. The ambulance rushed Adrianna to the hospital, lights flashing, sirens blaring, but it felt like there was already a silence hanging over everything. Amanda followed, clutching AJ close, probably holding on to him as if she could somehow keep him safe from this unfolding nightmare. At the hospital, the medical team worked frantically, but after an hour of trying to resuscitate her, they called it. Adrianna was gone. I can't even imagine what it must have felt like for Amanda at that moment, hearing those words, watching her daughter's small body just still. She didn't cry, didn't react, just stared, frozen. People would later say her reaction was strange, but who really knows how you'd respond to something that unimaginable? The initial conclusion from the authorities was straightforward. It looked like a tragic accident. Adrianna must have slipped, hit her head, and fallen into the pool. With no ladder set up on the side, it made sense she couldn't climb out, especially if she was unconscious. People began to mourn, offering Amanda condolences, the whole town grieving with her. But then, out of nowhere, AJ started talking to his grandfather about what he had seen. And that's when everything took a dark, disturbing turn. AJ, just 6 years old, started sharing details that no one could ignore. He told his grandfather that he'd seen his mum hold Adrianna down in the pool. He was so young, but the way he described it, Amanda pushing Adrianna's head under the water, not letting her up, was chilling. AJ explained that it all started when Adrianna got into cleaning supplies and Amanda got angry. The story sounded impossible, unbelievable even, but he was so consistent, even drawing pictures to show what he claimed had happened. His little sketches were simple, but they held a disturbing clarity, a rawness that made people listen. It wasn't long before AJ's story reached the police and they couldn't ignore it. Imagine being Amanda, already shattered by her daughter's death, and then hearing that your own son is saying you killed her. The authorities reopened the case, digging into every detail, every corner of Amanda's life. They questioned everyone who knew her, especially her co-workers, and some of them hinted that Amanda had been frustrated with Adrianna in the weeks leading up to her death. One colleague even claimed Amanda had once mentioned that Adrianna was driving her crazy and that she was at her wit's end. What might have been a mother's exasperation in any other context now looked sinister under the spotlight. As the investigation deepened, they started uncovering unsettling things about Amanda's home life. The kids' room was in disarray, no bed sheets, toys tucked away in storage, and a strong smell of urine lingering in the air. It was hardly what anyone would expect from a home with young children. When asked, Amanda explained that she'd taken the toys away as punishment, something any parent might do, but the investigators saw it differently. They saw signs of neglect. And then there was Adrianna's past. People started whispering about how Amanda had lost another child, a baby boy named Alex, years ago. Back then, it was ruled an accident. He'd supposedly had a seizure. But now, with AJ's testimony, even that tragedy seemed questionable. The police also questioned Amanda's reaction at the hospital, which some staff found unnerving. They described how she just stood there, emotionless, as if she was detached from what had just happened. But others insisted that Amanda was simply in shock, saying that everyone processes trauma differently. Still, the community was left wondering. Was Amanda a grieving mother, or was there something darker hidden beneath the surface? AJ's testimony grew more powerful, casting shadows over everything Amanda had ever done, and people began to see her less as a victim of tragedy and more as the cause of it. With AJ's account being so disturbing, the police decided to bring him in for an official interview. Now imagine this, a 6-year-old boy sitting across from grown men in uniforms being asked to recall every detail of that horrific day. He stuck to his story though. He said his mum had held Adrianna down because she was angry, and when they pressed him for specifics, he pointed out exactly how it happened, down to Amanda's hand on Adrianna's head, pushing her into the water. The officers tried different ways of asking, hoping he might change his story, but he was unwavering. Every word he said made the case against Amanda look grimmer. The courtroom, when the trial finally came, was packed. The whole town was there, watching the horror play out in a place that was supposed to represent truth and justice. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats as AJ was called to testify. He sat there, small and vulnerable, facing a sea of faces, many of whom he recognized, his own mother included. When asked if he knew where his mother was, he hesitated, then pointed toward her, his face filled with a sadness no child should have to bear. The prosecutor's questions were gentle, but each answer felt like a knife twisting deeper, painting a picture of a mother's wrath that seemed all too real in that charged room. As AJ told his story in court, people watched Amanda closely, waiting for any flicker of emotion. She sat there, barely moving, her face expressionless, which only seemed to make things worse in the eyes of the jury. For those who didn't know her well, her stoic presence seemed cold, almost detached, but her close friends and family argued that this was just Amanda's way, her coping mechanism in the face of unimaginable pain. They pointed out that when she first found Adrianna in the pool, she'd been inconsolable, so much so that she vomited from the sheer shock. But here, in the courtroom, it was as if she'd shut down completely, retreating into herself. AJ, on the other hand, continued to share every detail with a heartbreaking clarity. He even showed the court his drawings, simple crayon illustrations that depicted his mother, his sister, and the pool. To him, these weren't just images, they were memories he was reliving in real time. The courtroom was silent, people too horrified to speak. They looked at Amanda, then back at AJ, torn between believing a small boy who spoke with such conviction and a mother who seemed so isolated in her own grief. It was a silent war of emotions with no clear winner, only an overwhelming sense of dread hanging over everyone present. The prosecution's case grew stronger with each witness. Co-workers testified that Amanda had frequently seemed stressed, even saying she was fed up with Adrianna. In one instance, she had reportedly mentioned that Adrianna was driving her crazy after a minor incident, like scribbling on something important to her. While it could have been nothing more than a frustrated parent venting, in court, every word was dissected, turned into a possible motive. Then they brought up the marks found on Adrianna's forehead, small bruises that could have been from someone pressing her head down. To the prosecutors, it was more proof that AJ's story was true. The bruises, they argued, lined up with his description of Amanda pushing Adrianna under the water, a chilling visual that lingered in everyone's mind. As the trial dragged on, Amanda's defense tried to explain away each piece of evidence. They argued that AJ was too young to understand what he'd really seen, that he could have misinterpreted an accident as something intentional. They suggested that maybe he'd overheard adults speculating and taken those ideas as his own memories. But no matter how hard they tried, AJ's words kept returning to haunt the courtroom. His story was unwavering, consistent, and detailed, leaving everyone to question, could a child make something like this up? And if he couldn't, what did that mean for Amanda's innocence? The defense also raised questions about the role of Amanda's stepfather, Charles Burns, in all this. They pointed out that after Adrianna's death, AJ had been left alone with his grandfather for a short time, just 15 minutes, but long enough, they argued, for someone to plant ideas in a young child's mind. Charles and Amanda had a rocky relationship, and the defense suggested he might have influenced AJ to accuse Amanda out of spite. But it was a weak angle, and everyone in the room knew it. There was no concrete evidence that Charles had coached AJ. Instead, the image of a 6-year-old recounting his story, drawing the tragic scene, was burned into everyone's mind, an image that was hard to shake. After all the witnesses had testified, Amanda herself took the stand. She maintained her story from start to finish, insisting that Adrianna's death was a tragic accident. Her words were steady, but she looked worn down, her face pale, her voice carrying an edge of desperation. She pleaded with the jury to believe her, explaining that AJ was mistaken and that she would never harm her child. But, as she spoke, the room seemed to close in around her. Each word, each explanation felt like a small, futile attempt against a tide that was too powerful to stop. The weight of AJ's testimony and the mounting suspicions seemed impossible to overcome. When the jury went to deliberate, the entire courtroom held its breath. The decision felt inevitable, yet no one could deny the haunting uncertainty that still lingered. After only a couple of hours, including a lunch break, the jury returned. The verdict was delivered swiftly, guilty of first-degree murder and aggravated child abuse. Amanda was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her reaction was muted, almost as if she'd known it would end this way. Her family broke down in the gallery, and AJ was ushered out quietly, likely too young to fully grasp the weight of what had just happened. In the aftermath, the town of Esto was left shaken, divided. Some believed Amanda was a monster who'd hidden behind a facade of single motherhood. Others argued that she was a victim of a system too quick to judge, convinced on the testimony of a child whose memories could have been influenced by trauma or, worse, manipulation. AJ was placed with relatives and later adopted, leaving behind a family fractured beyond repair. To this day, people still argue over what really happened that day, whether Amanda was truly guilty or if a tragic misunderstanding cost her everything. Years later, Amanda remains behind bars, steadfast in her innocence, haunted by the same questions that linger for everyone who followed the case. She's given a few interviews over the years, still insisting that Adrianna's death was an accident, that AJ must have misunderstood. Watching her speak from prison, you can see the weight of it all on her face, a mixture of exhaustion and quiet defiance. Some days, she still holds on to the faint hope of clearing her name, but she knows that for most people, the verdict is final. To them, she'll always be the mother who took her daughter's life and was betrayed by her son. The mystery of that day in Esto remains tangled in doubt, forever clouded by the innocent eyes that bore witness and the silent pool that swallowed one young life. Amanda's story, whether a chilling truth or a tragic misunderstanding, still strikes a deep nerve, leaving us all questioning how well we can ever truly know the people closest to us. In the end, the case left a scar on everyone involved, and the truth of that scorching August day might forever remain lost in the stillness of that backyard pool, hidden from view just beneath the surface. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If you found this story gripping, don't forget to like and subscribe to Criminal Minds True Stories for more real-life mysteries. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant.